My favorite movie franchise of all time is The Lord of the Rings. For me, there is no better example of how you bring a magical, mystical, mysterious world to life on the big screen than what Peter Jackson and his team were able to do with these 3 films. Somehow, they were able to condense 3 substantial books into 3 theatrical releases while still maintaining every important story beat that makes the book so iconic to this day. And in an age where film studios take one single small book and turn them into 4 movies by adding all kinds of useless content, the Lord of the Rings films have always been a breath of fresh air for me. Central to all these preserved storylines, though, is the story of Frodo, the movie's main protagonist or hero, and his friend Sam, who accompanies him on his journey to destroy the ring. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about there, I'm sorry, and I don't have time to explain the plot. All you really need to know for today is that the journey was perilous. The chance of success was slim to none, and everyone knew it before they set out. And yet, for the good of all living things, it had to be done, and Frodo was chosen to do it. However, he didn't have to do it alone. In fact, he couldn't do it alone. He had many people supporting him along the way, rooting for him and working on his behalf from afar. But more than anyone else, Sam was his lifeline. Sometimes literally saving his life, and always emotionally, mentally, and spiritually being there for him. Sam walked with Frodo to literal hell and back, as it's imagined in the movies, and that's the kind of thing lifelines do. Today, we'll see how Jesus surrounded himself with these kinds of people, and when he needed them, they were willing to walk into the fire together. And let's be honest, if Jesus needed them, you better believe that we're going to need lifelines too. Last week, Ellis told us about Mary and Martha and how Jesus met Martha right where she was, even in her distraction, to show her the thing she needed to hear. It changed her perspective and made her slow down long enough to realize what was important. This week, Mary and Martha actually feature again, but in a roundabout way. This time, the pair sends word to Jesus that their brother Lazarus is dying. We're never really told how they formed a bond, but it's clear from John chapter 11 that Lazarus and Jesus were good friends, most likely because Jesus spent a lot of time in the home of Mary and Martha. Either way, Jesus finds out about Lazarus' declining health, and he says this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister, Mary, and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." Now, there are a few interesting things about Jesus' response here. Like, why would Jesus willingly stay put for a couple days after hearing that his good friend was sick? Especially if you're Jesus, who could actually do something about it. We find out later in the story that Lazarus has actually died by the time Jesus arrives, and Mary and Martha, they can't understand why he would wait to come. Now, it's an amazing story, and there's a whole point to it. You should read this entire chapter on your own time, but we're not actually focusing on the Lazarus part of the story today, interestingly enough. Rather, it's the next section. It's the conversation Jesus has with his disciples in this moment that shows us what lifeline friends look like. And here it is. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago, the Jews tried to stone you there, and yet you are going back?" I mean, the response from the disciples, it seems like a pretty valid one. What you may or may not know is that Jesus, as he became more and more famous in the region, he accumulated more and more enemies as a result. Jealous religious leaders who wanted nothing more than for him to be out of the picture, gone. So on a recent trip to Judea, Jesus narrowly escaped death. And not too long after that, he wants to go back? I mean, I imagine the disciples are thinking like, "All right, dude, we hear you. We love Lazarus too, but you just told us he wasn't going to die. And yet you want us to risk our lives to go drop off a get well soon card? The disciples, they were a committed group, clearly. I mean, they had been following Jesus everywhere, but their real commitment was about to be tested. Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. Which, let's just stop here for a moment. I think this is pretty funny. There's comedy all through the Bible. You maybe have to look for it sometimes. But I love this. Jesus is saying, he's just asleep, but I'm going to go wake him up. So disciples are like, then what are we doing, dude? Like, when I sleep, I feel better. So why are we going to do this? If he sleeps, he'll get better. I just imagine them saying it like that. Okay, we're good. Like, let's not go. But Jesus, he continues, and he actually reveals what he's trying to say. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep, which I would have as well, by the way. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Okay, not totally sure why Jesus had to say it in a roundabout way, but the truth is now out. When Jesus said earlier that it wouldn't end in death, the story would not end in death, perhaps he didn't mean that death wouldn't at least be a stop along the path. Clearly, Jesus has a plan. But as I said earlier, we're not going to get to that part of the story today. What's important for us to know is that after Jesus says this, the disciples, they're up to speed now. They know Lazarus is dead. And suddenly, it makes a lot more sense why Jesus would be willing to risk the hostile environment to get to him. And yet, the disciples still had a choice to make. Because, they could bail out right here if they wanted. They certainly weren't perfect. And if you keep reading their story, they famously bail on Jesus when he needed them most. But in this moment, they weigh their options. And Thomas, one of the disciples, speaks up on the behalf of everyone else. Then Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Interestingly enough, there's a bit of controversy, or I guess different interpretations around the exact meaning of this statement if you look into it. There are those who believe that Thomas is speaking sarcastically here. And he's essentially saying, well, okay, if Jesus is going to drag us through this hostile environment, then we might as well just be like Lazarus and go die. But if you really look at it and put it in its proper context, it's actually a statement of fierce loyalty and commitment on the part of Thomas and the disciples, saying to Jesus, if you go, we go. The disciples made the decision to walk with Jesus behind enemy lines because they loved him and would willingly give their lives for him, which I know I said earlier they bailed on him at one point, but at the end of the day, at the end of their lives, all of them paid with their lives to follow him. And that's what being a lifeline is all about. They were unwilling to let Jesus walk through tragedy and danger alone. And if we're going to be those kinds of friends, we've got to be willing to do the same. Jesus' disciples did in fact go with him to see Lazarus. And there they got to witness a miracle of restored life. And Jesus brought him back from the dead. It's incredible. Sam went with Frodo and played a critical role in destroying the ultimate evil once and for all. And you and I, if we're going to be lifeline friends, we need to be willing to do the same. What's true about life is that you and your friends are going to walk through incredibly difficult seasons. The loss of a loved one that they can't get over. The pain of not measuring up to what they feel like they should be. Rejection after rejection from those they love. Absolutely terrible decisions that they made and now regret. Whatever the hardship may be, when the time comes, if they're ever going to recover from it, they'll have to have lifeline friends to do it. Repeated tragedy and heartache has a way of making a person lose themselves and start to question their very existence. And without friends to remind them of their value or that they aren't the sum of their circumstances, things can go from awful to much, much worse. So lifeline friends are critical, and being one can literally change the course of somebody's life. So how do we do that? What does it look like to be a lifeline friend in these situations? Well, first, we have to learn how to help carry the burden. When Jesus decided to go see Lazarus, the disciples knew that it would lead them into a dangerous spot. Yet their desire to be with Jesus as he visited his friend outweighed the potential harm they would face. And when you and I decide to be lifeline friends, the situations we walk through with those that we love will always be heavy, full of raw emotions, deep sadness, hurt feelings, regret, maybe all of the above. And we've got to be willing to take all of that heaviness on ourselves as well, so that the burden is lighter on the person who's hurting. This will make it easier for them to navigate the situation, and it'll spread out the load among many instead of one. Next, lifeline friends need to always remind their friends that they are not the sum of their mistakes. In the case of Jesus, the dangerous situation he was entering was not of his own making. However, your friends are going to do things that are 100% their fault, because no one is perfect. Not me, not Ellis, not any of your leaders, and not you. And when this happens, lifeline friends need to be the first to remind the ones they love that their mistakes do not define who they are. There will be lots of people who don't know your friend like you do, and they will summarize their entire life based on this one thing they know about them, this one mistake. And without the perspective of a lifeline, friends, those who make the mistake will start to believe that they're nothing more than their failure, because it'll be the only voice they hear. Lifeline friends remind the ones they love that there is hope beyond their sin, that there's a future beyond the wreckage they've left behind, and that God's plan for them, it doesn't go away due to one or many bad decisions, no matter how bad they are. Now, this doesn't mean you have to agree with their decision or you can't speak hard truth into their lives. Lifeline friends, they do that too. That's what Ellis taught us last week. But your most vital role is making sure that they know that they aren't the sum of their mistakes. Lastly, lifeline friends follow up long after the hurt is over. As time goes on, tragedy and pain, fortunately, they have a way of lightening up. Even still, those who have walked through it never feel the sting of it go away completely. Lifeline friends recognize this and continue to check on their friends from now on with no end date. Not to resurface the pain, but to remind them that they haven't forgotten the hurt either. It also serves as a commitment that should tragedy ever come again, they'll be right by their side, ready to do it all over again. There's a universal truth to life that we all must face. You probably already know it. It's hard. And no matter how well you navigate it, trouble will come. If you want to have the best chance of walking through the fire, you need to build and foster lifeline friendships. Because without them, the hardest parts of life will drive you out into the vast wilderness with no hope in sight. But with them, you'll find your way back to where you belong, because you'll always have a lifeline to guide you home.